So maybe you're building a brand new PC, or maybe you're updating an older PC, but now you're stuck on how to install an SSD, or maybe even better, how to install a blazing fast M.2 SSD. Well, don't worry. In this video, I'm going to show you not only how to install either disk, but I'm also going to show you how to install Windows 11 as well. Then afterwards, just in case, as I mentioned, you're updating your PC, I'm going to show you how to install it as a secondary drive on your older PC. Without wasting any more time, let's get started. Starting off with the motherboard, the M.2 slot can be just about anywhere. There could be one under this heat shield, one or two under this heat shield, and anywhere else on the motherboard. So you might have to look inside of your motherboard manual to verify. I'm just going to go right over here at the very first M.2 slot. I'm removing the heat shield. And the M.2 SSD is right over here. You might also want to check inside of your motherboard manual to verify with your CPU which slot you can utilize. And we can grab the drive right over here. You'll notice there's a little notch right over here, and you may be able to notice there's a notch right here as well on the M.2 socket. We're going to go ahead and grab that M.2 SSD, line up the notches, and then you see these little gold fingers here. We're going to want to make sure we completely install them into the M.2 socket right there, and then push the M.2 SSD down. Now, depending on your motherboard, you will need an M.2 screw right over here. Now, the M.2 screw will come with your motherboard. Either it will be already installed into that screw hole, or it will be inside of your motherboard box inside of a little baggie. I'll go ahead and link down in the description where you can buy additional ones if you need them. Now, not every motherboard uses M.2 screws. In fact, this motherboard doesn't. They have a little notch right down here that we can just twist it like this, and it holds the M.2 SSD down perfectly. And then now we'll go ahead and put this heatsink back in place. Now, if you've never used the heatsink before, there might be a film on here. Remove the film so that you have this thermal pad. So we'll go ahead and just line up these screws with these screw holes where they originally came from. We'll just drop them right in place. And just screw them in. Your SSD might come with an additional heatsink. Your motherboard may or may not have a heatsink for that M.2 SSD. If it does, go ahead and use this one. If it doesn't, use the one provided by your M.2 SSD. So let's go ahead into the BIOS and configure this real quick. When we first turn on the computer, we're going to want to go ahead and tap the delete key or the F2 key, or whichever key it is to enter your BIOS. So the first thing that we're going to want to do when we power on a machine is we're going to want to flash the BIOS. We're going to want to get the latest BIOS on here because there are typically many M.2 fixes here and many other memory fixes and just many fixes in general. And we want to make sure Windows is installed with all the fixes possible. So after we're back in the BIOS, we're going to go into advanced mode, and it may be different on your board, but there's an easy mode and an advanced mode on Asus boards. When we're in advanced, we're going to go to the exit section and we're going to load optimized defaults and OK. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up some BIOS defaults. I'm not going to go into great explanation here because every single board is different, but definitely set up your date and time right up here. Mine are correct over here, but you'd want to set yours up and then click save. Under AI tweaker and AI overclock tuner, you're going to want to enable your XMP settings or your AEMP settings, whatever you may have. You want to enable those profiles for your memory. Setting the profiles sets the speed for your memory, and it also sets up the cache, RAS, TRAS latencies, and the voltages as well. After setting that up, that goes ahead and sets up everything here, so you don't need to touch anything, and I recommend you don't touch anything after that. So then we'll set up everything under here. Under trusted computing, because we're installing Windows 11, you want to make sure that TPM is enabled. Security device support is enabled as well, coming out of there. You also want to make sure under PCI subsystem settings that above 4G decoding and resize bar support are enabled so that you would have resizable bar within Windows. Now don't freak out if under NVMe controller and drive information you don't see anything yet. Coming under Intel Rapid Storage Technology, that's where you'll see your M.2 drives. Here we can see our Sovereign Rocket for 2 terabyte drive. Now, under boot, there is CSM. This is something you're going to want to disable, but on some boards, it can be finicky. And that's what's going to allow you to use an M.2 drive. But if you want to enable it, you want to make sure you come under here. You're going to see UEFI and Legacy OPROM. You don't want Legacy only. You need UEFI as well. So come in here, make sure that you have UEFI. Boot from network, because we're not booting from network, that part doesn't truly matter. Boot from storage devices, we want UEFI only. And boot from PCIe, PCI expansion devices, UEFI only. Now, again, board specific, but I disable all of that so that Legacy is not enabled, so that I have only UEFI. And it also states here down as well. So coming out of there, here we can see under boot option number 1 and boot override that it's seeing our generic flash disk. That is our Windows installer. So now at this point, we can go ahead, save changes and exit. Everything you've changed will be listed here. I've already gone ahead and done this off camera, and I'm just coming back to show you how it's done. But then afterwards, you just click OK. So then when we boot and we have that thumb drive installed, it's going to immediately boot to that thumb drive so that we can install Windows 11. So then here we'll select our language, time and currency, keyboard input, and we'll click next and install now. If you have a key, you can go ahead and enter it in here, or you can skip it for now and enter it in later. I'm going to skip it for now. And then you select your version of Windows. I'm going to select Windows 11 Pro, and make sure to read through all of this, and then I accept and next. Custom install only. This is the perfect opportunity to show you this. Now, obviously we have a drive inserted, but we also have RST. I'm gonna go ahead and link up above and down below in the description on how and where to get these drivers and how to install it. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and take care of this real quick, and I'll just show you here. So load drivers, browse. We're going to select the second thumb drive I just installed. And now here we can see the controller. So I'm gonna select both controllers. Now it's installing the RST or the RAID drivers into the image so that it can detect the M.2 SSD. Because I've used this M.2 SSD before, we can see drive 2, partition 1, and partition 2. I'm gonna go ahead and delete both partitions so that now this is one entire drive. I just deleted both partitions. This is an empty drive. I know it's empty because it says unallocated space. That means it's empty. And there's 1.8 terabytes of free space. So rather than refreshing or loading additional drivers or clicking new, I'm just going to click next. And this is going to take a few minutes. Okay, now we have 10 seconds. We can remove both thumb drives and click restart now. I'm showing you just to show you, but you're not going to need to do this, especially if you only have one drive, which again is the way I recommend you do it. So after we installed Windows and we removed both thumb drives, I go into advanced mode and I go into boot. Notice that now we have a Windows boot manager. We didn't have that before. We had the thumb drive and we also had the Sovereign Rocket. Now on the Sovereign Rocket is written a Windows boot manager, one of 3 partitions Windows creates. So now I'm just gonna hit F10 to save and exit and then OK. And that reboots the computer. Now that it reboots the computer, again, since that's the only drive we have on there, we're not gonna have any issues. It's immediately going to start to boot from it. So then here we're going to select our country or region and click yes. Select the keyboard layout and yes. I'm not going to add a keyboard layout, but if you did, you would click add layout. I'm going to skip it and let's connect you to a network. So here we can go ahead and click Shift F10 and type OOBE /bypass NRO. And this is going to restart the computer real quick to bypass network connectivity in case you don't have a network at the moment. Now, once it restarts, it'll take you back to here. So we'll just go past this real quick. Now we have the option, I don't have internet. So I'll click that and continue with limited setup, which it's not really limited. You can go ahead and set all of these and click accept. And now we're done installing Windows. Now you remember, you have to install your driver. You can let Windows automatically download all the drivers for you, but they're gonna be old. You want to install the latest off of your motherboard's website. You know, write a fresh install. You're going to see a bunch of errors here. You install the drivers to clear all of this up. So now let's go ahead and install Windows on the SSD. Now that we're going to install on a standard SSD, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the M.2 SSD. Now, of course, you can install Windows with however many drives installed in your machine that you want to. I like to do it with a single drive installed at a time. That way, when I delete partitions, I don't delete the wrong one. So on our motherboards, for a standard SATA drive, we're going to use a SATA data cable. This little guy right over here. You'll notice coming up close, there is what looks like a little L. This connector right over here. This is the SATA connector. This is going to go installed on this little connector over here that also looks like an L. We're just going to bring those two L's together, and we hear a little clicking sound with this type of cable, and it's locked, so you can't pull it apart. To remove this, you'll just push this metal down and it removes. So then again, join these two L's just like that. Now there's a second L. I'll remove this so it focuses correctly. We're going to need the SATA power connection. Now it's just a different sided L. You see the little bracket right down here instead of right over here, then it slides across over here. So it's double the length, or maybe a little bit longer than the SATA data connection. The SATA power connection comes from your power supply on your computer. Now, most power supplies today are modular. The cable might be inside of the box for the power supply, or it's already connected and you just need to find it in all of these cables. So searching through there, we'll find this cable here. This is the SATA power connection. We'll find that little L right over here, and then the long portion. So then we'll go ahead and join this L with this L like this, and then the SATA data connection right here. So now SATA power and SATA data right over here. And I'm showing you this outside of a computer because it's a lot easier like that. And now for the motherboard, we'll want to connect the opposite end of this cable into a SATA port over here, or wherever your SATA port may be on your motherboard. On this particular motherboard, the Tough Gaming Z90 Plus Wi-Fi D4 board, or the D5 board, will find some sticking straight out right over here, the SATA data connection, that we can just grab the other side of the SATA data connection. That little L right over here, you'll see that also matches that little L right over here. We can just drop it right in place, and that goes ahead and connects what the other side would be on the drive, or we can install it on the 90-degree SATA ports right over here. Same way, L to L right over here. Now you also want to make sure, if you're using an M.2 SSD and a SATA SSD, depending on your board, it may disable two of your SATA ports. So you need to make sure in your motherboard manual that wherever you have this SATA connection, that it's not disabled. And if it is, just disconnect the cable and reconnect it on a port that works. Pretty simple. On the inside of your computer, like I showed you before, I have a SATA cable connected right over here. Now along the back is where we're gonna find our 2.5-inch drive base. Now mind you, this is going to be different for every case. There's 12 trillion different kinds of cases out there, but I'm going to show you how I do it on mine. So first I'm going to unscrew this tray right over here. So now we have this tray where we're going to install our SSD. Our SSD, along the back, there's 4 little screws. We're going to match them up with these screws right over here, and just make sure that they line up right over here. And we're going to screw in 4 screws, 1 on each of those holes. Now you don't really need all 4, but I like to put all 4. And these are typically going to be the same screws you would use for your motherboard. The reason why you would use all four is to keep vibration down on your case. Mind you, the SSD doesn't move, but the rest of the case does because of the fans. So that'll keep it from rattling in there. I'm gonna go ahead and install this one and this one off camera. So give me 1 second. So now all four are installed. And the way I showed you before with the SATA power connection, we're going to go ahead and connect it right here. And the same way with the SATA data connection, we're going to install that right over here. And then you'll notice there's two little holes right over here, and those coincide with the tray here. I'm trying not to move it very much. These SATA port connections are very delicate. So then afterwards, we'll go ahead and slide that right in here. And then we'll go ahead and screw this back in place. So now we've installed the physical drive, SATA power, and SATA data. And again, I'll remove the M.2 drive because again, I don't like to install Windows with other drives installed, just the main drive I plan to install Windows on. Now go ahead and turn on the computer and we'll go into the BIOS like we did before, just tapping the delete key. Now that we're back in the BIOS, after installing the SATA SSD and we have the thumb drive installed that has the Windows 11 installer, we'll go back into advanced mode and we'll come under boot. Now, it looks like we've already installed Windows on that SSD before. We have. So what we'll do now is to boot to the thumb drive with Windows 11 on it. Here we'll select UEFI generic flash disk, or we can just click on it here. So what I'll do is I'll select this as the main drive, then I'll hit F10. Since we've already made all the changes in the BIOS, F10 to save and exit, and I'll click OK. And again, we'll select next here, install now. I don't have a key, but again, if you want to, just input it there. And Windows 11 Pro, next. This is such important information. I read through it all. I accept. Next. Custom install. Like we did before during the other install, because we're installing on RST, we don't see our drives here. Down below in the description, there's a more thorough video on how to get it done, but I'll just show you here. Load, browse, the RAID driver, a second thumb drive I plugged in. Driver, 64-bit. Okay, we'll select both here. Next. And then these are all four partitions on one drive, drive 2. So I'll go ahead and delete all of these partitions. This is the 500 gig Western Digital Blue drive. Now I'll just select next. I don't select new, load driver again, or refresh, just next. And this will take a few minutes. Okay, pulling both thumb drives and clicking restart now. And now that we've rebooted with the Western Digital 500 gig Blue drive only installed on the machine, it's booting directly to the Western Digital install and completing the install now. So just a little bit slower. We'll select our country or region. We'll select US and we'll skip the secondary layout. Checking for updates. And now we'll go ahead and name our device. I'd like to set it up for personal use. Next. I showed you on the M.2 install how to skip this part. So I'm going to show you how to do it without skipping this part. So now I'm going to enter in my Microsoft account. 1 sec. And I'm going to go ahead and set up as a new device. And next. Create a PIN. 1 sec. You can select what you'd like here and then click accept. And again, whatever you like here and click accept or skip. And I don't want to set my phone up on the PC, so I'll skip this. And no thanks. No thanks. Again, no thanks. All right, and like before, we're in Windows. I'm gonna select no on this one. And like I mentioned before, Windows is going to start installing a bunch of stuff, but as you can see, there's a lot of stuff missing in here. I highly recommend to not let Windows install everything for you. I highly recommend to go on the motherboard manufacturer's website, download and install all of the drivers, download the video drivers afterwards, and then you'd be good to go, like I've shown you in my other videos. So the other scenario is maybe you had that Western Digital as your C drive before, but you wanted to upgrade. So you upgraded to the M.2 SSD, and now you want to put that Western Digital back in. You have two instances of Windows. You want that Western Digital as a storage drive, or maybe you want your old mechanical drive as a storage drive and you also had Windows on it. Well, let me show you how to take care of that as well. So after installing both drives, we're gonna go ahead and boot into the BIOS real quick. And then you might already notice this over here, but we're going to go into the advanced mode first, and then we're going to go into boot. Now here you'll see two Windows boot managers. One is that Western Digital WDC WDS 500 gig and the Sovereign Rocket. The Sovereign Rocket was the M.2 drive. Then you'll notice there's also a capacity difference. This one's 500 gigs while this one's 2 terabytes. I'm going to go ahead and select the Sovereign Rocket as the main boot drive because I want it to boot into Windows on that drive. So now I'm going to hit F10 and I'm going to save the changes made. Then I'll reboot the computer. And then now that we're in Windows, we'll go ahead and just click on the start button, type in CMD, we'll right click on the command prompt and then run as administrator. Yes for UAC. And then on the command prompt, we'll type Diskpart. Warning about this part. This part will control your disk. If you tell it to erase a disk, it'll erase it in 1 second and there's no coming back. So make sure you know what you're doing, pay very close attention. Then here we'll type list disk. Okay, we see 3 disks on here. The 29 gig, that's the thumb drive. The 465 gig, that's the Western Digital 500 gig. And the 1.8 terabyte is the Sovereign Rocket. Now we can also see in File Explorer under this PC, 465 gigs is the 500 gig Western Digital Blue, and then here is our thumb drive. So now I'm going to select disk 1. Disk 1, again, is the 465 gig or 500 gig Western Digital Blue drive. That's the one I want to delete. We're selecting disk 1 because disk 1 we want to delete. Press enter. All I type is clean and it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead, type exit, get out of here, exit again to close out of here. Now if I go in File Explorer, this PC, that 500 gig doesn't exist. Now what I'm going to show you not only works for Diskpart, this will also work if you just bought a brand new drive and you're introducing it into your brand new computer or your older computer that you're upgrading, you're adding a secondary drive. So we can close out of here, then we'll right click on the start button and then we'll go into disk management. Now disk management brings up Initialize disk. Initialize disk is we've introduced a brand new blank drive. We just wiped it out. It's essentially a brand new drive. Now we make sure disk 1 is selected and we have 2 options here. We have master boot record, which is basically Windows XP and below and is for drives that are under 2 terabytes. GPT, Windows 7 and above, and is for 2 terabyte drives and works together with UEFI. Even if it's under 2 terabytes, always select GPT. You may have noticed before it showed offline, now it shows online. And as we've gone over twice before, this 500 gig is unallocated, which means it's clear. And if we go in here, again, we don't see it. It doesn't have a partition and it also doesn't have a drive letter. So now we'll come here on that unallocated drive, right click on it, new simple volume, next, select a size here if you'd like, next, select a drive letter, you can select whatever drive letter you want, next, I'll call it whatever I want, storage WD 500 gig. And I'll leave it as NTFS, allocation unit size default. Make sure to leave perform a quick format on by default. If not, it'll take a long time to format it. Then click next and finish. This will only take a few seconds, then it pops right up over here. If I click this PC, we'll see C drive, 1.8 terabyte. Storage WD 500 is our 465 gig or 500 gig WD Blue, and then our 29.2 gigabyte thumb drive. So we've gone through a lot of things in this video. To start, we installed an M.2 SSD. Right now, currently the fastest SSD, not that particular drive, but M.2s in general are the fastest drives in a consumer PC. I showed you not only how to install it, but I showed you how to flash the BIOS, and then I went over basic BIOS settings. That way you can actually utilize your drive, and then we went over a little XMP and everything defaults just to get you up and going in case you've never flashed the BIOS before. After that, we installed Windows 11. The BIOS flash was to make sure that your Windows install goes well. You don't want to install Windows with issues because you're always going to have issues. Then afterwards, we shut down the PC, took the M.2 SSD out, then we installed the Western Digital Blue 500 gig drive, which it in itself is a great drive, but it's incredibly slow. For example, the M.2 was, let's say, 7 gigabits per second, while the WD Blue is only about 600 megabits per second. That's incredibly slow comparatively. And then we set up the BIOS and then installed Windows 11 on that WD Blue. Then we went a step further. You just updated to an M.2 drive, cool. Now you want to take your Western Digital Blue drive, your older, slower drive, and you want to make it a D drive. I showed you how to do that as well. And well, you could also do that with a mechanical drive. Either which way will work. So we ran through a lot of things, but I wanted to help you completely understand the different ways that you can utilize an SSD, be it an M.2 SSD or standard SSD, even the grandfather. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below. I reply to everything. I've shown you in this video how to install an OS on an M.2 and an SSD, but a lot of you may not want to do that. Maybe you just bought an M.2 and you want to clone your old drive onto your new drive. I don't recommend it, but if you really want to, I have this video here that'll show you how to do that step by step, easily enough, get you on your new M.2 with your old drive. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou out. See you guys.